Hello guys, Dizzy here. So today we'll be continuing our series on looking at each class to help us decide which one to pick when Baldur's Gate 3 releases in a few days. Now in this video we'll be focusing on DPS, or more specifically magic DPS, or as we call them in the olden days, spellcasters. So without further delay, let's get to the video. Before we continue, please consider casting a spell on that like and subscribe button to be notified of new content. Now let's get back to the video. So before we look at each individual class in its own, let's first know which is common amongst all three classes, because there are things that they all need and utilize. So first of those is the spell list. They all use a spell list. This is not the in-game tomes that they use to write their spells in. This is a rule that specifies the list of spells that each class can use and learn in the first place. So each has a different spell list, although, especially in the case of Sorcerer and Wizard, their spell list overlap. The spell list of the Sorcerer is essentially a subset of that of the Wizard. Also, all of the magic DPS classes use the concept of spell slots. Spell slots, at its most basic concept, indicates the number of spells the spellcaster can use in a given point in time. So for example, a 3rd level wizard can cast 6 spells in a day or in between long rests. Those 6 spells are composed of 4 1st level spells and 2 2nd level spells. That as an example. You will see this more when you look at the progression table of each class. Now, also, it used to be that all classes has no armor and low HP, but the Warlock was an exception. Is now an exception to that, because it has a D8 for its HP dice and can wear simple and medium armor, light and medium armor, if I'm not mistaken. Also, the DPS is part of the Trinity. The Trinity is the type of classes. The Trinity indicates the 3 class types that are needed for each adventuring party. So, to give you guys, to make it more relatable to you guys, the concept of DPS, support, and tank came from the Trinity, because it used to be that the tank is the fighter or fighter type, the DPS is the wizard or some spellcasting, offensive spellcasting class, and the support is usually the healer or the cleric. So let's look at each spellcasting class individually, starting with the wizard. The wizard has the most known spells in the game. Flat out, if he or she encounters a spell, he or she can probably write that in his or her spell book and having it become a known spell to him or her. But the counterbalance to that is he or she still need to prepare a spell. What is that concept? So remember that a wizard has a certain number of spell slots, right, determined by his or her level. So for example, a 3rd level wizard has 6 slots. So even if he or she knows 20 spells, he needs to choose 6 of those to put in those slots. Also, the wizard still has the lowest HP in the game, on par with the sorcerer. That's just really how it's designed. Now, in terms of flavor or theme, or traditionally what we call fluff, the background of the wizard is that he earned his power. He had to study and learn to get his power. That's usually the background of the wizard. So let's go to the sorcerer. The sorcerer traditionally knows less spells than the wizard. So if you look at its progression table, you will see that there's a hard cap of 15. But the sorcerer does not need to prepare spells. So for example, the 4 slots that the sorcerer has at, for example, 2nd level, can be used by any of the 10 spells or 5 spells that he has, that he knows. So he does not need to pick a spell beforehand and put it in a particular slot. So each slot can use any of the spells that he knows, thus giving the sorcerer more flexible options during a situation where he or she uses those slots. Also, most importantly, that I didn't write in this slide, is that the sorcerer has a mechanic called meta magic. Meta magic is a mechanic that allows the sorcerer to modify a spell in a small but impactful way. So for example, a sorcerer can increase the damage of a spell, or increase its duration, or increase the number of its targets. It does meta magic can do a lot of things, but those are some of the examples. Of course, the sorcerer still has low HP like the wizard. It's just designed that way. Thematically, or background wise, or fluff wise, the sorcerer is always the one who was born with power, meaning he or she can innately or intuitively use magic. So usually the background is the sorcerer has an ancestor that gave him or her a bloodline that allows him or her to have spellcasting abilities. Lastly, let's go to the warlocks. First off, they have a higher HP than the other spellcasting classes because they use the D8 dice for the HP. Also, they can wear light and medium armor, which makes them limitedly useful for melee engagements. Also, warlocks have invocations, which is a mechanic that's very similar to spells and even sometimes use spells, but modifies them for a particular use that's related to the background or fluff of the warlock. Which brings me to that subject. The warlock is usually portrayed as a person who gained his or her spellcasting abilities through a pact or a deal or a bargain with a being of a higher power or an otherworldly entity. Now, that's it for the spellcasting classes, for the magic DPS classes. If you guys are still here, thanks for dropping by. And as always, see you on the next one.